Today, I'll be doing North Carolina. So first, I'll talk a little bit about the head coach, and then I'll talk some about the roster, and then I'll go through their schedule game by game and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So head coach Mack Brown enters his sixth season at North Carolina since he's been rehired there, but he was their head coach in the 80s and 90s for 10 seasons. So this is his 16th overall season as the head coach of North Carolina, and his overall record at North Carolina is 107 and 73, and this is his 36th season as a head coach. And his overall record as a head coach is 282 and 149. North Carolina is the fourth different place that he's been a head coach at. In between his two times at North Carolina, he was the head coach at Texas for 16 years, where he had a whole lot of success. The first 12 seasons he was there, he got them 9+ wins every season, including in 2005 a national championship win and a 13-0 season. But then in his last four seasons at Texas, he only won 9 games one time. And of course, he took 5 seasons off of coaching in between Texas and coming back to North Carolina. But since he's been back at North Carolina, his record is only 38 and 27. I think he's past his prime as a football coach. And I think I've said before that this will be his last season as the head coach of North Carolina. I think he's going to retire because I think he's missed his opportunity these past 2 years to get an ACC championship, but having Drake May, amazing quarterback, and he's old too. He's as old as Nick Saban is, and so in recruiting, he had the 26th ranked recruiting class this year. Uh, so now, starting on the offensive side of the roster at quarterback, they're not going to have the numbers that they got these past 2 years from Drake May. He was the number 3 pick in the NFL draft this year, but they could be in worse shape at quarterback. They brought in a transfer quarterback, Max Johnson, who is a very solid quarterback and a very experienced quarterback. He started 22 games in college these past 4 years at two different places, LSU and Texas A&M. He started 14 games at LSU and 8 at Texas A&M, and he started 5 games at Texas A&M this past season. And in his college career, he has 5,853 passing yards and thrown 47 touchdown passes and averages 7.5 a throw and a completion percentage of 60.5%. So he's not the type of quarterback like Drake May that is going to be a contender to win the Heisman Trophy, and he's not going to give them that running yards that Drake May did. He's just a pocket passer, but he should do fine for them at quarterback. I'd be shocked if he doesn't win the starting job. And at wide receiver, they've got J.J. Jones coming back, who was their leading receiver last year. He had 711 yards on 46 catches and 3 touchdowns, averaging 15.5 a catch. And they've also got Nate McCollum, who had last year 469 on 44 catches and a touchdown, averaging 10.7 a catch in 10 games last season. And they've got a really good tight end coming back, Bryson Nesbitt, who played in all, 12 games last year, but only started 2 games and still had 585 on 41 catches and 5 touchdowns, averaging 14.3 a catch. And then at running back, they return Amarian Hampton, who is one of the best running backs in college football. He had last season 1,504 yards on 253 carries and 15 touchdowns, averaging 5.9 a carry. And he had 7 games of over 100 rushing yards. Now, the offensive line is kind of concerning. I think they're taking a step back here. They lose their best player, maybe, on the offensive line, Diego Pounds, who is transferred to my team, Ole Miss. And they only have two starters coming back. Now, one of them, guard Willie Lampkin, is a good player. He played in 11 games last year and only allowed 3 sacks and 11 total pressures. And they do have two transfers coming in, but they're not great players. So their offense probably won't be quite as good as last year, but it should still be solid. And on the defensive side, so these past couple of seasons, North Carolina has had a lot of very talented defensive players, but their defense has still been bad. Last year, they averaged giving up 27.3 points per game, and they ranked 90th at stopping the run, giving up 163.2 a game, and 94th at stopping the pass, giving up 241.2 a game. So on the defensive line, they do have three out of four starters coming back, including Kamon Rucker, who is one of the best players at his position in the country. He had last season 61 tackles and 60 total pressures and 8.5 sacks and a forced fumble and fumble recovery and a pass breakup. And they've got Desmond Evans, who is also a good player. He had last season 33 tackles and 27 total pressures and 3 sacks and 5 pass breakups. And at linebacker, they've got Power Eccles coming back, who is a really good player. He had in 2 seasons combined 205 tackles and 3 pass breakups and 2 interceptions and 2 sacks and 3 forced fumbles and 30 total pressures. But other than him, they're questionable at linebacker. This is probably the weakest spot of the defense. And now the secondary looks very good. North Carolina's secondary, I think, is going to be a strength for them this year. They should be much improved here. So at cornerback, they've got Marcus Allen, who had last season 49 tackles and 8 pass breakups and an interception. And they've got Elijah Huzzy, who played in 11 games and had 42 tackles and 6 pass breakups and 3 interceptions. And then at safety, they've got Antavius Lane, who had in 11 games last season 62 tackles and a pass breakup. And he only started 3 games last year, and he also had a forced fumble. So that was impressive to only have started 3 games. And they've got DeAndre Boykins coming back, who missed all of last year with an injury, but was a really good player for them in 2022. He had then 67 tackles and 7 pass breakups and 2 sacks and a fumble recovery and an interception. And on special teams, both the kicker and punter return. So the kicker looks to be good, but the punter struggled last season. So this team still has a lot of talent. They'll be a solid team, I think, but not a great team. Not a team that's going to be a contender to win the ACC this year. So now moving on to the predictions. They start the year on the road at Minnesota. So I said in the Minnesota video that I think Minnesota beats them. So Minnesota's defense, I think, is a little better than North Carolina's is. And North Carolina has more options with pass catchers that are good than Minnesota does. Minnesota only has one good pass catcher. But Minnesota has a better offensive line, and they've also got a really good running back too. I do think though that this one will be a pretty close game. So then they play Charlotte. This will be an easy win. And then they play North Carolina Central. This will be another easy win. And then they play James Madison, a team that's been one of the better group of five teams, but I think they're going to fall off this year. This should be a pretty easy win. Then they play on the road at Duke. So Duke is going to fall off this year, but they didn't lose everybody like a lot of teams do now when they lose a coach. They still kept quite a few talented players from last year's team. Now they did lose a lot, but I still like their secondary, and I like the quarterback transfer that they brought in. And I'm actually going to go with Duke to get this upset win, playing at home. I think that'll make the difference, but I think it'll be a really close one, and that North Carolina is a better team. But I can't fully trust North Carolina to win every game they're supposed to. So then they play Pittsburgh, a team that has been horrible last year, and they're going to be just as horrible this year. One of the worst teams in the Power Four, and they probably wouldn't even be in the top half of the group of five if they were a group of five team. They're going to be like on the level with Vanderbilt and Colorado this year. This should be a pretty easy win for North Carolina. And then they play Georgia Tech at home. So I think this will be a close game. The two teams are fairly even, but I do think North Carolina's roster is better than Georgia Tech's. So Georgia Tech's front seven is going to be bad, I think, and I think North Carolina's running back Hampton is going to have a huge game against them. And Georgia Tech does have a pretty good secondary. I think that they'll slow down the passing attack from North Carolina, but North Carolina has a good secondary too, and they'll slow down. I think Georgia Tech's passing attack. Now, Georgia Tech is going to be a good rushing team and have a good offensive line, and they'll be able to run a lot in this game. But North Carolina does have some good players in their front seven that I think it can get enough stops on them to win this game. So then they play on the road at Virginia. So I know what happened when North Carolina played them last year. They lost at home, and I know this is on the road now. And could Virginia win this game again? Of course they could. But it made no sense last year for Virginia to beat North Carolina, and it makes no sense for me to pick that to happen again. I'm going with North Carolina because they're a much more talented team still than Virginia is, but this one could be pretty close. And then on the road at Florida State, Florida State's going to have a great run game. I think they'll have a lot of success running the football in this game. And North Carolina, being strong in the secondary isn't going to be too much of an advantage in this game because Florida State's passing game isn't going to be that good, I don't think, this year. And Florida State's offensive line and defensive line are really good. I think they'll beat North Carolina at the line of scrimmage in this game. And Florida State's secondary is very good too. They'll slow down the North Carolina passing attack, and I think they'll win this game by around 10 points. So then they play Wake Forest, a horrible team. I think they're similar to Pittsburgh. This should be a pretty easy win for uh, North Carolina. So then they play on the road at Boston College, a team that is not any good at all, but is better than teams like Pittsburgh and Wake Forest. They're probably more like Duke, and I can't trust North Carolina to win. even all but one of these types of games. I think they're going to lose a couple of games to these types of teams this year. So I'm going with Boston College to pull the upset in a close one. Uh, then they end the year in the rivalry game at home against NC State. So if you watched the NC State video, you saw that I think North Carolina wins this one in a game that would probably be an upset if North Carolina were to win. But I'm not real high on NC State this year. I think they're going to be a pretty good team, but I don't think they're a top 15 team. And North Carolina can still match them with talent, really. And I think that this will be a pretty close game, though, and it's for sure a losable game for North Carolina. So my final prediction for North Carolina is 8-4 overall and 5-3 in the conference. So probably at worst case they lose one more and finish 7-5. And probably the ceiling would be 10-2 because they do have a very easy schedule. So that will be it with this video, and thanks for watching. And please subscribe, and I'll be back soon.